I was watching Spider-Man No Way Home in 4D with YouTuber Acel Byzantine. It was an interesting experience. Slight spoilers for that movie, but while I was watching Peter get absolutely wrecked in a 1v1 against Gabi over here, I had that sinking feeling in me. Now, I watched this movie before. I know how it went, but it still felt awful to see Peter, our hero, losing the fight. And of course, like anything else, I decided to make content out of it. If you're a big fan of anime, which strangely I am not, look, most of my free time has been taken up by reading like 200 plus Webtoon series. But one of the most anime-like Webtoon series I've ever read is actually the Webtoon series that hasn't gotten the anime. Instead, it's Eleceed. This one. I don't know how to pronounce it. Anyways, this series is probably the most anime-like series ever. Eleceed takes place in a world of super-powered people known as the Awakened. Think unordinaries people, villain to kill psychers and villains, hero killers gifted, or lady knights knights, or 21st century knights. Wow, that's a lot of super-powered people. Anyways, unlike another video that did a little too well on this channel, our main character, Jiwoo's awakened power is not a copycat, anything you can do, I can do better power, like some other people. Instead, it's super speed. Nothing extraordinary. However, how things get interesting is that Jiwoo just straight up didn't know that the awakened world existed. He lived his whole life feeling like a monster. Reminds me of a different character, right? It's actually quite interesting how similar Jiwoo's motivations are to a different Webtoon character. Slight spoilers for Unordinary, even though if you're on this channel, you probably already know that. Anyways, it's surprising how similar the motivations between Jeon-do and Jiwoo are. Both consider themselves monsters due to the past mistakes, and because of that, they try their best to hold back and not use their ability, causing an irrational fear of their power. The difference is more the consequences of said action. John lived in a world defined by their power. Giving up your power is giving up on a chance to live a normal and peaceful life, or as peaceful as you can get in the world of Unordinary. And having no powers was practically a death sentence for John. But he was still too afraid to use his powers, yada yada yada, stuff I literally talked about last week. Jiwoo is in a different situation. His world isn't defined by these superpowers. In fact, he never even knew other people had these powers until the series starts. Jiwoo feels like a monster, not because he's brutally beaten up people who've cared about him. Instead, Jiwoo just felt like an outcast, like a freak, like a monster, who had these random powers. He was shunned as a child for accidentally revealing it, which I gotta say, if some kid showed me he had super speed, I would 100% try to be their best friend, but that's besides the point. Jiwoo felt alone in the world, felt like an outcast, felt like a monster, causing him to avoid using his ability, avoid getting close with others except cats, which this series draws adorably. God, I love cats. Anyways, it all changes when Jiwoo finds and befriends an incredibly fat cat. This cat isn't just any Garfield fat orange cat that can talk, but Kaden, one of the Awakened world's most powerful and dangerous fighters, unanimously accepted by the world's top 10 to be their equal. Kaden is dangerous. However, after he's ganged up on, he has to hide in a body of a fat cat, and that's where Jiwoo finds him. The story is honestly pretty great, but it's a little bit on the generic side. The idea of awakened people, and we follow someone who just started their training, who's a optimistic ray of sunshine and the power of friendship and whatever, like I said, very anime. But I think this series actually focuses on something that's actually really cool, that being despair. Jiwoo starts the series on his own. He doesn't have any friends, his mother travels around the world, his father is MIA, because of course his father is MIA. Only when Kaden comes into his life does that life start to get better. But it's that despair that I really wanted to focus on. As I mentioned at the beginning, that sinking feeling you get when things aren't looking great for whoever we're rooting for. Like when Gabi is bodying Peter. Despair is a powerful tool in any author's book, and in many series, especially outside of the more actiony series, despair is replaced with drama, especially the more tropey things like miscommunication. But in action, Despair is fantastic. A lot of series use it. Unordinary second season is all about that feeling. Villain to Kill's opening is all about despair, and if you've read any of The World After the Fall or watched my video on it, then you're aware of how powerful despair can be. However, while The World After the Fall really pushes hard on that theme, I don't think it's the best example to use. Instead, I wanted to focus on the series I've been hyping up this entire time, Eleceed. Like I said before, Eleceed is very anime-like in its nature. However, I think it tends to use that to its advantage, especially with our main character, Ji-woo. If there's something I love, it's characters in gray. However, Ji-woo, well, he's not that. He's bright, he's cheerful, he's friendly, he's brave. He's the purest of pure anime protagonists, a ray of sunshine with the power of friendship and befriending every person imaginable. But some of the best parts of the series are when Ji-woo fails. Ji-woo throughout the entire series is incredibly human. What I mean is Ji-woo is incredibly gifted, he's talented, considered a genius by even people who've been training their entire life, even though he's only been training for just under a year by the latest couple episodes, but he's still only been training for just under a year by the most recent chapter, which means he's still learning. Even though he's learning from the best of the best, though in cat form, even if he's learning and training at an incredible rate, Ji-woo is just a tad underqualified. And this series doesn't beat around the bush with that. Ji-woo is constantly losing throughout the series. One of the first major fights is a loss. The next major fight with Ji-suk is another loss, as he's outsped and overwhelmed. His next fight with Ji-suk ends in a tie, more than an outright loss, but not a victory. The point is that Ji-woo loses a lot, and these losses feel believable. They feel realistic. It makes sense that Ji-woo can't and likely won't win against many of these highly trained and highly skilled awakened kids. And surprise, surprise, he doesn't. This feeling, watching Ji-woo lose over and over and over again, makes every correct step, every punch landed, each time they underestimate him, feel like a victory. But where this mainly comes into play is in the first Awakened Academy arc. Some quick info before this arc. Ji-woo befriends Ji-suk, that cocky kid who's been training since he was a little kid. Woo-win, the first villain's adopted kid, and Subin Lee, the granddaughter of the president of the Union. I think the Union is like a secret service in Korea for the awakened people. Anyways, after somehow befriending all three of them, they all learn that they're going to participate in the Awakened Academy, where Korea sends its awakened students to participate and train and learn together. After Ji-woo gets into some problems with a kid who's honestly not all that important, they head into the academy, and that's where it really starts. Okay. So you see, the academy divides the students into two groups, the affiliated and the unaffiliated. Being affiliated means they're part of some awakened organization. For example, Ji-suk is part of the Shinhwa group, one of the major groups in Korea. He's affiliated. Meanwhile, Ji-woo and Woo-in aren't part of any group. They're unaffiliated. Unsurprisingly, the teachers consider the affiliated kids more valuable, since their worth has been proven. They're given better lessons, more attention, whatever. This causes a pretty big division between the two groups. And when a teacher wants to do, his job and teach, they force the unaffiliated and the affiliated group, i.e. the group that's been training since they were young to fight and use their powers versus the group that's had next to no training or acknowledgement, to fight. The fight between these two groups is brutal and disheartening. It's more of a massacre than an actual duel. It's bleak, and except for a fight between Woo-in and an affiliated kid, it's hard to watch. Watching these kids stand up and try their best only to lose terribly, some getting absolutely wrecked, it's painful. And these couple chapters are hard to read, not because they're poorly written or poorly made, but because they're purposefully heart-wrenching. Because these fights represent so much more than just a duel, but they represent the student's future, the respect that they have to earn, also the entitlement we want to wipe off the affiliated students' faces, which culminates in a battle between Ji-woo and Soo-chan. Soo-chan is practically the villain of this arc, constantly belittling and harming the unaffiliated students because he's the future leader of this major awakened group, and he sucks major butts. We've just watched all the students get absolutely beaten down, that despair starts to take over. But as Woo-win wins, there's this small feeling of hope that things might turn out okay. And as Ji-woo takes center stage and starts to lose the fight, that's where it all clashes together. This fight isn't just a fight between Ji-woo and Soo-chan. It isn't just a fight between the unaffiliated or the affiliated. It's not just a fight for the rights of the unaffiliated students or a better future for them. It's a fight between despair and hope. That sinking feeling in all of us versus the hope that it will turn out okay. Using despair correctly can be the best thing an author can do in an action series because we go so low. And as we're getting absolutely crushed by this feeling of dread and despair, that makes every victory even brighter than before. If it was just a battle between Ji-woo and Soo-chan, I'm not sure this battle would have had the same impact, would have felt as good. Because for a couple of chapters before, we went so low, only for the victory to taste even sweeter. The point I think I'm trying to make is that you shouldn't be afraid to let things get bleak. The worst thing you can do, especially in a high action series, is make everything a-okay. There needs to be stakes, there needs to be problems, there needs to be some dread, some looming feeling that if everything doesn't go right, if everything doesn't happen correctly, there's gonna be some major issues down the line. But if they go correctly, it'll be amazing. But if and only if the reader sees the threat as dangerous, as real, and most importantly, as possible. I love Eleceed, and despite its very anime-like nature and the fact that I'm 80% sure I'm mispronouncing the title, I love this series, and this feeling of despair is just one of the reasons why I think it's great. And if you do read it, I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. But like always, thank you for watching, and I hope I'll see you next week.